Welcome to The Slowdown, your time to redefine success and growth on your own terms with a little inspiration from others. A few years ago, I watched the film Babyteeth, which premiered at the Venice Film Festival in 2019 to standing ovation. At last check, it had 94% score on Rotten Tomatoes. I was moved to tears many times by this film and was surprised to learn that it was the directorial debut of Australian filmmaker Shannon Murphy. I've since gone on to watch many things that she has directed, including Killing Eve, her episode of which was nominated for 3 Emmys, Dave, which is literally one of my favourite TV series ever, and Dying for Sex, which has been nominated for dozens of awards last year. She has a way of capturing nuance, raw humanity, and emotion in a way that really stays with you. It lingers. Through sheer London happenstance, I ended up at dinner at Shannon's home last year and have been amazed by the volume of work she puts out and the way she thinks about creativity and life. I know being a film director of the highest calibre is not easy. Add to that being a single mother, continents away from your family. I wanted to know how she finds her voice and stands her ground, how she practices patience and creates such emotionally sensitive work. I hope you enjoy this episode with director Shannon Murphy. Thank you, Shannon, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I love to start at the beginning with this show and a bit of a context into your early world. So where did you grow up and what kind of stories shaped you as a young child?
So my parents met at the Nairobi Hilton, actually, in Kenya. My father was working in the hotel and my mum was there on a conference that she actually had nothing to do with. My grandmother was a travel agent and sent my mum instead. And so my parents met in Africa, fell in love. I was born in Joburg, and even though we lived in Botswana at the time. And then I grew up in Asia primarily and mainly in Hong Kong and had a very sort of international upbringing. And I guess that sort of informed my view of the world and sort of sense of humor, and I would say often my color palette, because I love sort of neon and bright colors from Hong Kong. And I also lived in Singapore for a little bit and Melbourne in Australia. And it was kind of a fascinating way to kind of experience different schools. My brother and I went to quite a lot of different schools, and my parents are very adventurous, so they'd always take us to kind of different countries and get us to really be curious about sort of other cultures that weren't our own. So, yeah.
It's interesting because I think some people find that kind of childhood difficult. Like they don't like being dragged around and moved, and they would look back at that with a sort of negative lens. In the sort of world I am now of film and TV, I do find that there's a lot of people who have a similar upbringing to me, who have had to move schools a lot and adapt really regularly to different environments. And that's why I think they are drawn to this sort of circus lifestyle of moving to different countries and suddenly forming a family with a lot of people in a short amount of time and just diving straight in and making connections really quickly. So it's actually not that unusual, I think, for people in the creative arts, in film and TV at least. Yeah. That was one of the things I liked about being a creative director and actually having been a model since I was 15, showing up in totally new environments and meeting a new team on every single job. And our jobs would usually just be one day. So it'd be like a whole new team just for the day. How was success modeled for you when you were growing up? What did you think success was, or what did that look like?
I guess I never really thought about that too much, but I definitely had, parents who were really high achievers. And, my father was a hotelier and loved his work, and we lived our life around his work. And my mum is an occupational therapist, and she's extraordinarily dedicated to her work of working with children with ADD and autism. And I'd watch how she would plan her sessions with them and be so committed to their progress. And, anytime we left a country, people would just drown her in sort of compliments and gifts and were devastated she was leaving because of the impact she'd had on their lives. So I feel like for me, my parents were my model of success. Yeah.
And at what point did storytelling start to feel like it was a language and a world that you wanted to work in?
I mean, when I used to read even picture books as a child, I remember I'd get so lost in them. Like I realize it's an extreme way now because I have a 10-year-old daughter and she's never really been as obsessed and sort of overwhelmed by stories quite in the same way. I mean, she did watch E.T. once and cried for about 2 hours afterwards. And I was like, that's the kind of response that I used to have to storytelling because I believe it so strongly. I used to draw a lot and kind of read things and then create further stories based on those characters. And I was obsessed with things like Jim Henson's The Storyteller series, which I found so dark and mysterious and full of really interesting visuals. Anthony Minghella actually wrote them, and they're still extraordinary now. You can watch them on YouTube. But I think I was always drawn to really dark but kind of colourful and interesting stories.
And then how did you realize that that could be a job, that could be something that you did? Like, how did you actually get to your first bit of filming?
You know, school. I had like amazing drama teachers. And I remember when I was about 16, 17, when you're at GCSE level and they start saying, what do you want to do as a profession? You should do the subjects that you really love and are drawn to. And I was like, well, but I love theatre and that's like a hobby, and how's that going to be a job? And then luckily, you know, I had teachers who were like, you know, we think that you're really drawn to being behind the scenes. And like, I didn't love performing ever. I always wanted to be directing. And so I liked sitting outside it. And I think all my teachers just kept saying, this is something that you seem to be good at, you should keep pursuing it. And so if I hadn't been given the confidence or the guidance to even think of it as a profession, I probably wouldn't have.
And was it immediately directing as a subject?
You know, like even at universities when I was there were no directing courses unless you went to like a really amazing, expensive sort of creative arts school. It was always kind of pitched to me as directing. It was a bit bossy.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember it really stayed with me, this memory. In 2017, a documentary called Winnie came out about Winnie Mandela by Pascal Lampshe, and she won a bunch of awards for it. And I went to a premiere of it where she was there and she answered some questions. And I remember her saying that as a female director, it was really difficult in the sense that she'd been given the advice young to be a producer. Women make good producers, they said. They don't make very good directors because they have to be leaders and assertive and masculine in order to command that bigger crew of people who are typically male as well. And so she was told, like, women aren't suited for that role. And there are obviously significantly fewer female directors. So I was wondering if you have a different experience of that, like because of your personality, that maybe you were told, yes, you should do this. And then why you think there are so few female directors.
Oof, it's a big question. Initially, I guess, you know, when you're younger, gender's not really something I think you think about too much. When you're at school, everyone's on an even playing field. And even at university, I never felt that. And then you sort of graduate and come out into the real world. And it wasn't until I moved to Australia that I realised my gender was talked about a lot in terms of directing. I have heard mad comments from producers saying things not dissimilar to that, which is that, you know, you need a man to lead an army into battle, as though that's what filmmaking is. And, you know, only male actors can fund films. Like, you know, this was like about 15 years ago, but still, I think even though we're pushing so much equality in this field for women, it's still, there's a lot of that mindset. In terms of, I guess, I didn't ever really feel it myself, except when I was in the theatre world a little bit, because I was always getting the jobs. So people were like, well, the men were a bit like, you know, don't complain, you're at least in the season. And I was like, yeah, but I'm the only female most of the time in a season of all male directors. And I know so many amazing women, and why aren't they getting these jobs? But there was a bit of a like, shh, quiet, because you're getting the work, which I found deeply frustrating, which is actually why I moved from theatre to film and television, because I was like, I want the bigger budgets. I want to be able to have bigger casts. I know that even though I keep getting employed, I'm getting the smaller projects, the more sort of indie work, even if it was professional, and that was super frustrating. So yeah, I mean, even if you look at the content now, it's quite hard for women to get the bigger budget projects. And when you're pitching on, I mean, let's even look at advertising. How many women direct car ads or airline ads? The big ones still go to the men because that's where the, strong leadership has to come in. So there's that, and also I would say, action films and certain things are still often, go towards men. But I've not really ever been in that situation because I've found a way out. Like I would go into different areas. I started doing some opera, I did performance art. As soon as I see a obstacle, I just shift because I don't want to lose my sense of creative freedom.
And you mentioned there this idea of you might be one female director on a season of episodes. Does that then create a sense with other female directors of, it's going to be you or me? And so there's a sense of disagreement. My question, I suppose, in its whole is, do you interact with other female directors and how do you support each other?
Yeah. It's only in theatre that I was one woman out of all the men. In TV, my experience has been vastly different because I actually think that the second I moved into television, I noticed there were so many women, female producers, especially in Australia, female directors. I was often surrounded by female directors. In fact, it was like one man sometimes directing a season. So it was actually the opposite. Now, I did happen to go into television by coincidence just as the Me Too movement was sort of starting. So there was a huge shift happening. When I do projects now, it usually is an all-female directing team, and we're super collaborative. So I learnt this actually from Reed Morano when I worked on a project called The Power. She would get all of us together on Zooms and talk about her creative vision and, still give us extraordinary freedom, but she wanted us to all feel like we were in this together, not sort of operating on our separate sort of individual blocks, which I loved, and so I still do that today with the projects that I lead.
And to add to that, I was wondering, why do you think it's so important to see things through the female gaze as opposed to the male gaze, especially with the sorts of projects that you work on?
Well, because in many ways it's completely original because we've spent so many centuries, watching, reading everything through a male gaze. So if you want original content, you basically need to hire women, is how I feel.
And then take me back through the timeline, because I think we've gone out of chronology. I'm obviously obsessed with the film Babyteeth. That was your debut. So how did you get to that film and how did you manage to get that film made?
So fortunate and easy for me in many ways because the producers, an executive producer, so Jan Chapman, who made The Piano and so many extraordinary Australian films, was our executive producer, and Alex White, our producer, had seen the play version of Babyteeth, which was written by Rita Carnier, who also did the screenplay. Well, they came to me and said, have a read of this script and see what you think. Now, I had been a theatre director for 8 years before that in Australia, and then I had started doing television. And Screen Australia, which is our big funding body, they had been helping me by giving me money to be mentored and had been really supporting and tracking my career. And they were kind of going, where's your feature film? And I don't write, so I always have to wait till something comes to me that feels like my voice, even though I didn't write it. And the second I read this script, the pressure was actually enormous because I knew that this was the film, but I also knew that it's not, you have to win the job. And I walked in for my interview and this always makes me laugh, but as I walked in, Alex went, oh, well, this is the piano from The Piano. And I was like, oh, my God. I was like, okay, just breathe. And I sat through the interview and we just were all on the same page about how we saw the film and it got funded very quickly. It was a low-budget feature and we're very fortunate to get the cast that we did, and I loved every second of making that.
And there's obviously very sensitive scenes in that. And I think having watched more of your work, for me, one of the thread lines was the sensitivity around those emotional human moments, especially grief. And was that something you developed in theatre? Was that something you figured out on the job? How do you create that moment?
I mean, I think I'm drawn to stories that somehow reflect my worldview or my emotional world. And I'm a very sensitive, emotional person. And also, I love a really dark sense of humor. So, and I do think that films and television and everything really that directors do has a huge amount of their personality in it, whether they write it or not. And so I often feel like what happens with the work, I always want to direct things where I feel like we have not quite seen this scene and this story this way before. And I'm always working with the actors to try and push it to another level and keep playing with what the scene could be so that we can feel something so completely unique but also feel so grounded in reality. And that can be quite theatrical sometimes in how far we push the performances. But as long as it's grounded in something truthful, I like to try and get away with it.
And then you took that to Venice. How was that? Was that your first big premiere experience of you and this fundamentally young cast? The two actors were how old at the time?
Oh gosh, they were so young. I mean, Eliza was like 20 or something, and Toby was probably only like 22 or 23. I can't even. Yeah, but we were shocked because we were this small indie Australian project, and we were in main competition, which we could not believe, and we were up against like Ad Astra and all these massive $1 million films. So we sort of just got the giggles a lot and like couldn't believe we were there. It was very emotional. I remember we were in the car on the way to the red carpet, and Toby's so beautiful. He was playing some music to try and relax Eliza and I. And when we got out, this song, Santiana, it's an old fishing folk song, which we had recorded with children from a local school choir in Australia. They played it as we came out, and we all just were like, don't cry, don't cry. This is really overwhelming. But we also just kind of loved it. I mean, what's scary about going to a festival like that is it was the first time anyone had seen our film because we'd only finished it just in time to make Venice. So we screened it. I didn't know what the audience really thought or felt, and you have to do a panel. And I'm not really comfortable with public speaking. I can pull it off, but it doesn't feel natural to me. And so I definitely ate a lot of beta blockers beforehand and just tried to relax. But all the journalists came in and they were very serious. And now I know that, the Italian journalists just take cinema so to heart and are so thoughtful about their questions. But at the time I was like, oh my God, they hated it. And we were all sitting on that panel and I was like, oh God. And then the questions started and they were so moving. And some of them, started crying as they were talking to us. And that's when we knew that it had had an impact.
It landed, yeah. There's also a well-known standing ovation that happens at these premieres. How did that how long did it go on for? How did that make you feel?
I can't remember. It was something ridiculous, like 8-9 minutes, which it's just really horrifying when you're in that moment, because at first you're like, this is so lovely. And then as Australians, we all can't handle it. And everyone's like, oh gosh. And I was like, please tell me like we can sit back down. And Ben Mendelsohn was like, absolutely not. You have to keep standing. And I was like, I'm dying. We were just dying. But it's so nice, but you just, you're sort of overwhelmed and you really are trying not to cry because you're just so relieved that people, responded.
Are you still in touch with that cast and that team? Is there a carry through? Do you work with the same crew?
Yeah, I mean, Toby and I were just messaging the other day because he's just got an amazing, massive job. He's going to do Andor. And, we are all still in touch. Eliza moved here to do Dope Girls with me a few years ago, a TV series. And, the crew, I really love having a very tight-knit sort of group of collectives that I work with. And Andy Comas, the cinematographer, and I are still incredibly close. And Cherie Phillips, the designer, moved here to do work with me. And I run a bit of a cult.
I love that. And it sounds like a lot of that work had been in Australia. So theatre work in Australia, and then that movie made in Australia. And then you started doing some big American TV shows. What was the difference for you in the American way of doing things, the TV way of doing things? Was there things that surprised you, or was it all amazing?
No, I mean, it's funny because whenever people do interviews about TV and film and they're like, oh, it's just such a wonderful, easy process, it's rubbish. It's like so challenging always because you're always working with a huge amount of people. But I would say, Australian sets are, we're not as heavily unionized to the extent where like you can't move a prop or you can't do this or that. I mean, I sort of do it anyway because I think we should all just muck in and be in it together, and I'm not trying to undermine anyone's position when I do it. But in Australia, everyone's sort of really grabbing the equipment and running when you have to get a train shot or, whatever's going on. And in America, it's much more rigid about who does what and times and breaks and all of that, which I think is both really important so that people don't abuse that, but it's also quite rigid and I would say sometimes unproductive occasionally. But you just get used to the models and you find your best way to work in amongst them,
Were you ever sort of starstruck by any of the actors that you worked with on those shows? It was Killing Eve, The Power.
Yeah. I mean, look, I get starstruck by actors that I think have really long careers that I'm so impressed by. Like Eddie Marzan for me on The Power or John Leguizamo, they were people I was so excited to work with because I've watched so much of their work over the years. I think it's always sort of not necessarily the most famous actors that I get blown away by, but often character actors that have been really sort of doing various, like really varied performances for a long time that I find impressive and that are really kind and generous on set to the other actors.
I was going to say maybe a better question is who was your favourite person to direct?
Oh, gosh, that's such a good question. Ben Mendelsohn was someone that blew me away in the sense that he's a very strong, eccentric personality. And sometimes I think you think that might come with, a really solid sense of like, no, I know what I'm doing. I don't really need too much of your input. But I have to say he's so free when it comes to direction. And Michelle Williams was the same, where you watch them have all this knowledge and body of work and they're so brilliant at their craft, but at the same time they're still so open and wanting direction and needing it and wanting a lot of it. And I find that sort of surrender to the process so admirable. I really love it because I've run a very playful set and a very physical process, and you sort of need to get on board in order to get the greatest benefit from it. And I'm always really delighted when they do.
Dying for Sex, watched all of it, loved it. When you make a show like that is quite, what's the right word, evocative, unusual, not ordinary, are you hoping that people get it? Like, are you like, I hope this lands? Or do you feel like there's enough writers, it's gone through enough hands for me to feel like this is going to land in the way that I hope it does? Or are you still, is there an element of, I really hope that people understand what we're trying to do here?
I mean, I only say yes to projects because I read them and I go, oh, this tone is so challenging. Like, that's my favorite thing, and it's the reason I pick projects. So with Dying for Sex, it's written by two extraordinary women, Kim Rosenstock and Liz Merriweather, and they are two of the funniest people I have ever met. Like, I have never wept so hard laughing on set. And also, they had to remove my laughter from some of the sound tracks because I would never normally laugh in a take, but we'd lose it because they'd throw out lines improvised at the last minute to the actors.
So the writers were there?
Yeah, they're right next to me, and they would throw out these new ideas, and even the crew would burst out laughing. We'd had many times where like the sound boom was like shaking. So I think, tonally I love when I go, oh, here we go, and all of us are there going, we hope it works because, there's so many elements that create tone, the design, the shots, the performance levels. And that's why I like a range of performance so that we can shapeshift it all in the edit. We know that we've got the funny version of that take, but we also know that we've got the more dramatic version so that you can, put it together like a piece of music later on and sort of track where it can best sound,
That was one of the things I really wanted to ask, which was about comedy. I tried my hand at a couple of kind of ads where, a client would be like, want it to be funny.
Yeah.
Just kind of funny. And so I was like, I could do funny, right? And when you write the script, you're like, that's quite funny. And then when you see it acted out, it's just not funny anymore. And so I'm wondering, so part of it was like having the comedy writers there to be able to improv. I feel like that would be because you might go, this just isn't reading as funny now live when we're seeing it in the moment. So yeah, are there any other hot tips for how to make things funny, like, or what you find works or doesn't work comedy?
I mean, look, with Dying for Sex, it's this really interesting mix of performers because you've got Rob Delaney and Jenny Slate, who are masters of comedy and improv. And then you've got Michelle Williams and JD Plus, who, I mean, Jay is so funny in his own way, but they're more dramatic performers. And it's actually, I always think about mixing the two, because comedy is nothing without the darkness or the tragedy. So I think I'm also really open with actors when we're trying to make something funny and I'm like, it's just not funny. It's not working. Help. Let's all let's brainstorm again. Does it need to be more physical? Does it need to be more subdued? Just throw away the line. Maybe that's what makes it funnier. And I think it's just about experimenting and knowing when you thought something was funny on the page and then it wasn't. I love working with comedic writers who are like, oh, God, that's just completely bombed. How did we never saw that coming. But so you have to think so quickly on your feet, and I think just keep trying until you nail it. It's trial and error really with comedy.
I made a commitment to being transparent about the making of this podcast right from the start. So here's a quick update of the financial side. Season 4 of The Slowdown does not currently have a sponsor. I really want this podcast to bring to light people, stories, and approaches to life that I admire and don't often see in mainstream media. So I'm taking on the studio editing and making costs of this season myself. If you're a brand, or if you know a brand that cares about bringing honest and applicable career advice to people at all stages of their journey, please reach out. I'm eager to find the right partner, hopefully long term, to help fund and continue the show so that it can keep growing. In the meantime, your comments, reviews, and shares of this episode are so important. If you're not already, hit subscribe, share this episode with a friend, drop a comment on Spotify and a review on Apple. It really does make a difference and continues to inspire the change that we're hoping to make in slowing down. Thank you so much for your support. And over the last, I guess, more than 5 years, basically, since Babyteeth, you've worked on how many projects? I'm just trying to get a sense of how busy you are. How long are these projects? How intense are they? What's the cadence and the rhythm of work?
Honestly, I don't know how many projects I've done since Babyteeth, but filming is intense. I just came off a 50-day shoot last night, and ironically, I'm here on a podcast called The Slowdown, and I most certainly have not been doing that. But earlier this year, I was in development for kind of 6 months. I did an advert at the beginning of the year, and then I really do need the ebb and flow of that, because shooting something is so intense and you're on a project for a long time in post-production. So I'm so looking forward, for example, to next year, only focusing on film and very much going into my slower mode of working, which is just where I can open up my creative headspace again. Someone described it to me recently as every time you do a project, it's like a bottle of water and all your creativity is kind of drunken down to this last little bit, and you always have to make sure that there's a bit reserved so you can build that back up again. And, the way that the science of creativity works is you have to have those moments of sort of slumps in order to have those epiphanies again. And so I need to go into a space where I'm reading and just going to galleries and cuddling my daughter on the couch and letting my brain kind of go a bit mushy in a way so that I can have all those sparks happening again.
Yeah, they say boredom is the wellspring of imagination, and we don't allow ourselves to be bored that often. But when you have, just got back off 50-day shoot, 60-day shoot, as a mother, how have those two things worked for you? What role does motherhood play in your work life? How have you been able to balance those two things, if at all?
Honestly, being pregnant was one of the most creative moments of my life. I was directing an opera at the Art Gallery of New South Wales, and I remember just feeling so alive with creativity. And also, you know, something people don't talk about often is like when you're pregnant and in the last trimester and then when you're breastfeeding, you're basically stoned all the time from the hormones. And that's an incredible feeling where creatively you start firing off differently and go into this sort of beautiful headspace of daydream. And so I actually found having a child really added to creativity, but also they make you see a very different version of the world and also force you to have downtime in the most fabulous way. You know, one of my favorite things is just sitting for hours and cuddling and listening to her rabbit on about whatever she's currently into. Yeah, I think it actually makes you a better creative. Can do.
You mentioned there the kind of balance and the cadence between projects. I have friends who are actors who really struggle with that shift, like this really drastic shift from being on set with this circus family all day, you know, late into the night. You build these relationships and then you're kind of thrown back into your one bedroom alone in a different city and without the knowing of when you will have your next project. But it sounds like you have built a better relationship with that cadence. Is that something that you built over time, this knowing of something else will come and I will have this experience again? Or have you always just been comfortable with that rhythm?
No, I think, you know, when you're starting out, it's very hard because you need to know when that next job's coming because of the paycheck and you're not making enough money to kind of, you know, even pay your bills usually for most creatives at the beginning, you know, decade even. But I'm definitely comfortable with it now because I know, I mean, my brother's hilarious. He's always like, how do you live your life not knowing like what paycheck is coming when and balancing finances? And I said, you just have to give in to that. If you worried about that, you couldn't do your job. So you just have to trust. And of course, there's been moments in my life a while ago now, but I would have to say to my friends, like, has anyone got a job? I've done like crazy stuff like typing up transcripts for, you know, reality TV shows and anything that could make money at the time. And that's just part of it. And I think it makes you, you know, you're a bit of a survivalist initially, and then you start to enjoy the balance and the fact that you do get breaks, like you need them. It's impossible not to have them. I think I'm so good at it now because I actually really look forward to the breaks. Whereas before it was like, oh gosh, will I ever work again? But now I just have to trust that I will.
What do you do in your breaks? What's your idea of slowing down?
I love being with my friends, going for big walks, exercising. Like we're so unfit when we're shooting and we're so fit at the start. We always love joking, like take a photo before and after a shoot, and it's such a different thing. Your skin changes. You don't have any sleep. I mean, last night when I got on the plane, I finally kind of realized that the shoot was finished and I had a big cry, but it was great. It was like this wonderful release of tension, and I am going to miss that crew so much. But you also go, we'll work together again. You do run into the same people over and over again, but you have to learn how to release that incredible attachment that you get to people. And I do it by looking ahead. So they were like, how come you seem fine with ending tomorrow? And I was like, because I've already moved forward into the future. And I am someone who's very in the present and in the future. And that's how I stay from getting too sad when a project finishes.
And reverse problem, have you ever had burnout from a really intense shoot, or, you know, maybe there wasn't a very nice person leading that project that you felt overwhelmed by? How did you know that you were feeling that? Because I feel like our bodies tell us before we realize. And then how were you able to recalibrate?
Yeah, I most certainly have had that. And you have to be so careful when those situations happen, especially if there's one where you haven't been getting along with someone and it's been affecting your ability to do your job well. That's, I think, for me, the worst kind of example of burnout. It's only happened to me once, but it was really destructive and I had to kind of build myself back up. And I think the way I did that, though, was, you know, I think it's really important to keep a dialogue with the people closest to you and listen to their advice. And I had a lot of people really help me feel strong enough to kind of set boundaries with that person. It didn't kind of reverse how challenging it had been. And yes, it gets into your body and takes time to kind of release their effect on you. But I would say, yeah, you just have to spend time getting back down to who you are and ground yourself, as an artist so that you don't lose that incentive or feel like you don't want to do it anymore.
Has filmmaking taught you anything about yourself that has surprised you?
Yeah, I think I'm surprised at how much I love chaos and love the bigger the team almost now, the better. Like I really am excited about the people management side of it. I really love that. I love having so many people on set and all of us having a good time. Like yesterday, my cinematographer, Annika, who brought a whole bunch of light-up scrunchies, which she was like, it's Christmas vibes. I'm like, well, it kind of looks like a rave on set. But we had so much fun and everybody had them in their hair and we were taking photos and, we're just making jokes all day long. And I think when you have an environment like that, it does take a lot of energy to create that, but it's just my favorite way to work. And just the fact that everyone, we give up a lot, all of us, time with our loved ones and, our energy and our sleep. But if we can come to work every day and be excited and also feel like we're all focused on the same thing. I'm not someone who storyboards or shot lists. So when we're on set together, everyone in the room, I need your ideas and I need your attention because we're genuinely creating this together and best idea wins. So let's go. So I love that level of focus from the whole crew.
Yeah, it's something I feel is so missing now. I recently did a brand shoot where they wanted everything on paper. It's this outfit to this location, to this pose. And this is just photography, like not even a film.
Yeah.
And I'd look at the reference picture and I'd go, but this reference image was something that they took all day to shoot in a creative, spontaneous way.
Yeah.
And now you want me to recreate that spontaneity. That's not how this works. And you'll get a much better outcome if you just let these 10 incredible creatives who've come together just make something with whatever the environment presents itself with. But I think there's a fear in clients, especially now with marketing purse strings being so tight, they feel like they need to know exactly what they're going to get.
There's a mistrust of creatives, I feel, and there's a lack of understanding that the energy that you're excited by when you see that image or you watch that piece of moving image is something that you cannot fake. Like you have to create an environment where that really comes alive. Like that electricity that you feel is a real feeling and energy that so you can't just construct it. And if you're sitting there just like ticking off shot lists, you don't need a director. Anyone can do that.
Yeah, and I think the thing about your work is it really feels true and honest and raw, and I guess that is reflected in how you then run the set, right?
Yeah, I think the way that you want the work to feel, you sort of have to live and breathe that ethos, really. I can't ask my actors or my crew to do something that I'm not doing myself, and I do really believe that you have to be as open and honest as the work you're trying to make. These days, I really do enjoy sort of just slowing my breathing or just not talking. I really think that if someone else is sort of getting aggravated or kind of getting on a hamster wheel about something or in some way I think, maybe being aggressive or blocking ideas or whatever, I sort of now let them sort of spin and burn themselves out rather than get sucked into that energy. I feel like if they want to operate that way, that's fine. I don't have to really engage. I can sort of give myself a mini lobotomy for a little while. And I think things need more time. We're in a society that rushes so much and needs immediate answers and solves, but we don't need to. And I think the best decisions are made with a bit more thought and time. And so I don't jump as much to respond to that sort of desire for immediate attention. And I think that sort of preserves then my own thinking rather than getting swept up in someone else's. I love it's so basic, but sort of having a cup of tea and looking out my window and letting myself sort of just settle more physically. I think it's really important. Like I love doing yoga or Pilates on a regular basis. I think getting back into my body really helps me.
In a role where, as we said earlier, there's a sense of you're leading us into war, you have to be this like strong, loud leader. How does that then marry with the silence?
On set, no, I'm not silent with that stuff. No, there's no time for that. No, all those things I suggested. Absolutely no, not on set. I think it's also okay, though, to have a moment where you might have like an outburst of frustration or passion or, on this last job I just did, The Age of Innocence, there were 2 days. One was an issue with sound and we had a little bit of a go at each other, and the other one was we were running out of light and it was super stressful, and we had 200 extras on set and carriages and horses, and there was just a miscommunication amongst me and the AD team, but we're so tight. So you can have those moments where you're sort of yelling on top of a mountain at each other, trying to get something to happen. And then 2 seconds later, we do this thing where we're like, come on, give me a hug. And we all hug each other because it's not personal and we've all got the same goal and we can laugh about it afterwards. But it's also okay to have those moments where you have to, yell at the top of your voice over 200 people and everybody's got to communicate fast and run around. And that's okay. It doesn't make you a bad leader, makes you someone that cares.
Yeah, and I'm curious what your relationship with awards is, because I think as opposed to an individual who is saying, I've just won this award for myself, winning an award for a film is winning for the whole team. So it's less selfish in a sense.
I mean, I don't really have that many. I've been nominated. Look, I love collecting gold stars. I always joke, I love getting those little stickers of appreciation like you did in primary school. I think I'm always moved more so by the fact that, especially when awards are voted by your peers, I find that really moving. And I also think it is so nice to have someone acknowledge your work. But like you said, for me, it's an enormous amount of people that did that with me. And so I get excited when we all know that was a group sort of achievement, but also when actors get nominated, I'm so proud because, I saw how hard they worked and how brilliant they were, and it's being acknowledged. I'm not someone who I'm competitive with myself. I'm not competitive with other people. So being nominated is something that I love, but I'm never that bothered whether I win or not. In fact, the idea of getting up and making a speech is horrifying. So my mum's always like, why do you look so happy when you lose? And I'm like, because I didn't have to get up and talk. But it's nice to, go and have fun at those parties and see a lot of people and celebrate, the year of creative work that's been made. But I don't ever think about it when I'm working. It's not a goal for me in any way. I hope that people like the work, but I'm there to make what I think is the most interesting version of that story.
When you say you're in competition with yourself, what does that look like in practice?
I guess I'm always trying to do something I haven't done before and keep myself stimulated. So it's like competing always with myself. And the last work I did, how can I do it better next time? And what is it that I'm exploring? The last 2 times I've done jobs that are period dramas, the second I'm watching it and I'm like, oh my gosh, this looks like a period drama. I'm like panicking because I want it to feel different somehow. And I guess it is just about always expanding myself as an artist to push myself to be exploring something different. And the way that I mainly do that is I'm influenced by everything else that's out there in the zeitgeist. And when I went to drama school, they always used to say, you have to be an informed artist. You have to know everything that's going on in every practice of the creative arts. And I do love staying in that headspace.
How do you stay informed? What are your favorite cultural inputs?
I mean, I love going to galleries. I love watching documentaries and films. I love going to music concerts, dance, mad performance art or experimental work. I just like seeing what everyone's kind of doing and stealing ideas constantly. We all do that, We're like, oh, what's that? And put it together and then it looks like something different,
And you say you're always trying to, do something new, keep yourself entertained. But do you feel like there has been some kind of through line of your work, of something that you want people to feel at the end?
I mean, I feel like other people always articulate back to me what those things are. Like, that's why I love doing interviews, or I love hearing what critics have said about things. I mean, I'm hypersensitive, so I also get really sad, obviously, if they don't like stuff. But I love hearing it described back to me because I don't think in that way, but I find it interesting to have my work defined by others. I guess overall there's a sense of work being quite physical, quite colourful, having a very dark, unusual sense of humour. Again, tone. It comes back to tone, really.
That leads me to legacy. And I guess so much of this podcast for me was me really trying to redefine success for myself, figuring out at what point did I define it? Was it something that was sort of defined for me when I was 18 and I've been living that out for the rest of my life without ever actually stopping and wondering? I had this overwhelming sense of I have to leave something behind. There has to be this resonating sense of legacy. And as I get older, I'm sort of unshackling myself from that more and more. But when you make film, it's a physical present thing that literally lasts on. And so I'm wondering what your idea of legacy is, and again, if it has changed over time.
I guess when I really think about it, I love the idea of people watching the work that I make and feeling like they can have deeper conversations with their loved ones. I think that's what it comes down to. Yeah.
I also love that you said, quoting you, I want to leave behind a body of work that my daughter will be able to watch when she's an adult and feel proud of.
Mm.
Is there part of the legacy for next generation?
Yeah, you're trying to make me cry. For sure. I've always loved the younger generation. I used to teach acting to teenagers for years in Australia, and it was my favourite thing to do because they are so vibrant and their view of the world is so black and white and their opinions are so strong and there's this incredible confidence, and I would just feed off that energy. And I guess in many ways a lot of times my work is it's not immature, but it's very much accessible to also that age group, because I think I'm always drawn to inspiring them, because that was the age that I was kind of most inspired as well, around sort of 17. And I just think that people don't always take the younger generation seriously, and I think they're kind of amazing.
I get a real sense of those like strong-willed characters in your work for sure, that are quite binary, that do see things in a certain way. And you know, as I mentioned, I'm trying to redefine success for myself, so other people's input is really valuable. I'm wondering what your current working definition of success is.
I guess I still just want my mum and dad to be proud of me more than anything. And for me, success is about continuing to work with the amazing artists that I get to work with. And all of us, you know, as contemporaries, pushing ourselves and creating more and more interesting work as we go. And that's really all I want. For me, it's not like a goal of a certain budget or a certain company to work with or a certain scale of story. I mean, I love really tiny stories that have a big impact. And I'm genre agnostic. I don't mind what worlds I'm creating, as long as we're all feeling like we've made something special together, really.
And do you think your parents are proud of you?
I do, actually. They don't really tell me to my face that much, but they tell other people. And I've always been like, I've got a hilarious story about when I was nominated for a BAFTA, and I told my parents, and I was so excited to tell them, and they were like, who else is nominated? And when I listed everyone, they were like, oh, Chloe Zhao. Oh, yeah, we loved her film. She's totally going to win. And I was like, that's not the response you're supposed to give me. But then I thought, oh, that's why I'm such a high achiever, because I'm constantly just wanting their gold stars.
Is there anyone's life that you look at and admire and think is a wonderful way to live and want to emulate?
When I look at some of the producers that I work with who have a lifestyle where they have somewhere to also escape to, I mean, that's something that I think would be a dream, to sort of have a serene place to sort of always go to and sort of hide away. You know, I think often creatives are actually also quite shy, and we present as very energetic, and we are, but there needs to be like a real sense of solitude. So I can't think of anyone specifically, but I do feel like the people that I admire a lot at the moment in how they work and how they've had such long careers, it's because they've always had this ability to come back to the basics of, you know, having somewhere where they can just be quiet and read and cook food and be with the people they love. And that would be a real goal for me. A
recharging of the batteries for longevity of the creativity. And what's next? What are you really looking forward to? What makes you feel alive? What project is making you feel alive right now?
I don't know what's next. I kind of always actually love that, that I'm like, I have no idea. I've got quite a few films in development that I'm so in love with and hoping that one will go next year. Otherwise, honestly, I'm so excited to come back to 2026 and re-ground myself in London and spend time with my daughter and friends and be really slow until I can't.
Is there a frustration in that process of really falling in love with a certain film and then it not going through its, financing or whatever it might be?
I mean, I'm very fortunate that I'm working with people like House Productions and Searchlight and Plan B, who are all incredibly skilled at getting films up. And so I really just do give incredible trust over to them, knowing that these films will get up once we get the right actor attached and the scripts are finished. Maybe I'm delusional, but I kind of feel like they'll all get up at some point and they'll get up at the right time, Projects can't be ready before they're ready, and you have to not be impatient about that, I feel.
It's a good metaphor for a lot of things in life. The last question I always ask everybody is, if I had to watch one film or read one book or have one cultural experience that would help me understand you better, what would it be?
I would say, like, in terms of someone who's probably influenced me the most and has, novels, practitioner books that you can read. Bertolt Brecht is someone that really changed my life when I studied him at GCSE drama. I had the most amazing teacher called Ian Baker who took his philosophies and turned them into a sort of context that us as young students could really grab onto. And I used so many of his techniques in my theatre work and my film and TV work. He was a German theatre maker who had this idea that work shouldn't just be emotional or intellectual. There should always be a juxtaposition between the two. In its most basic form, it's like if you have a funny scene, the next scene's quite dramatic. Or also don't trick the audience and lead them on, like maybe announce exactly what's going to happen in this scene at the beginning, or use text on screen, or for him it was on stage, or use music to break things up in a certain way. But it was never, sometimes people misinterpret it and think it makes the work cold, but I believe it's the complete opposite. It's so that you are both emotionally engaged but also intellectually engaged in the form and what you're experiencing. And so the goal is that afterwards it lingers in your bones much longer than just a piece that's been manipulative. And so I really love that. And really simple things are like breaking the fourth wall, looking directly at the audience. Those are sort of the most known versions of his techniques.
I definitely would say that the word lingers is a word I would associate with your directing and the work that I have seen. It stays with you for a very long time. Is there anything else that you wanted to add on this theme of slowing down or redefining success, redefining growth? Anything in your journey or motherhood or anything that you feel?
It's interesting, though, because I always think about my first day at film school. We had Gillian Armstrong, who's an amazing film director from Australia who did Little Women and many other great films. And she said to us, the biggest thing you can do as a director is work out how to make sure you sleep well, how to take care of your mental health, and how to stay in shape all the time. And I always think about that actually it had nothing to do with the other skills of directing. It was to take care of yourself first. And I think you really need to in order to kind of be a true leader in that way.
Thank you so much, Shannon.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in. This episode has been hosted and created by me, Tiana Tambridge. Produced by Whitney Rosenthal, sound and video production and recorded at Brazen Studios, cover art design by Natalia Ruhe. Please subscribe to The Slowdown to be notified of upcoming episodes, tell a friend, and leave a review. It really does help a new podcast like this get out in the world. And remember, we're all heading to the same destination and there is no prize for getting there early, so we might as well slow down.